In this demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate using the Open File dialog box and the Save File dialog box when making a Windows Forms application within Visual Studio using the Visual Basic language. And you will notice that once I begin my demonstration, I will be using Visual Studio 2015. But that does not matter. I do believe as long as you have Visual Studio 2010, that 2010 and above, that you'll be able to do what I'm going to demonstrate. You'll be able to perform what I'm going to demonstrate. Now your IDE is going to appear slightly different than mine, but you should be able to do whatever I'm going to do. And one common thing that I know that we all will have is once you start Visual Studio, click on File, New Project, and select Windows Forms application. And we're going to be making a SDI application, a single document interface application, versus as opposed to an MDI app, which is a multiple document interface. Okay, Windows Form application Visual Basic is selected, and by default, the name of the application is Windows Application 1. Change the name to whatever you want it to change it to. In this particular case, I just typed in edit demo. And by default, you see create directory for solution is checked on my GUI. And it's going to be, the new directory will be created. The new directory called edit demo will be created under right there, Visual Studio 2015 projects. And you can click OK to save. Just click OK to save the name, to save the project under the name that you typed. But in my case, I'm going to click cancel because I have a project already saved. And the name of the project that I already have is File Open Save. And one of the first things that you want to do when you create a Windows Forms application is to, well, by default, the form is going to be added. Once you save the project, then the form is going to be added, and you go to the design mode. You'll see the form. You'll see a blank form with no controls on it. Now, in my case, to my left, I see a toolbox. And under all Windows forms, I see common controls, pointer button, checkbox, checklist box, combo box, yada, 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 daytime picker. Okay, those are all good. Various controls that can be added to a form or to the project. Okay. And one of the things that we're going to need to add to this particular application is a text box. And you can do that by, you see I'm hovering over text box. Just double click text box, and there's the text box right there. I just drug the text box down, the one that was just added. And by default, it's a single, it is not multi-line. Let's go ahead and look at the properties of it. By default, the name of it is text box 1. You can change it to be more meaningful as you want. And I'm looking for multi-line, the multi-line property. We want the text box in this particular case to be multi-line. And there it is. Okay, we want multi-line to be true. But just so I don't confuse anyone, I'm going to drag my old text box out of the way. And we want multi-line on this guy to be true so that you can make him as high as you need him to be, because after all, the user is going to be editing information here. We don't know how tall or wide the information is going to be, so we want the text box to be as tall and wide as possible, as much room as we have. And speaking of that, We want scroll bars. There's none, horizontal, vertical, or both. In my case, I've selected both, so that if the data that the user needs to edit or view is wider than the screen, is wider than the text box or the form, then they can just easily scroll up or down and get to the line that they want or the section that they want to view or edit. And that's much more convenient from the user's perspective as far as navigation of the data. And before you write any code, I would highly recommend that you go ahead and click on Save Form 1, save the form, and then click the button, click the icon that says Save All. In my case, first I'm going to delete this new text box that I've added, and I am going to follow that same advice that I just gave. I'm going to save the form and then save all files associated with the project. Okay, just as we added the text box to the form, we will look at adding additional controls to the project in the form as well. I'm looking for a button, and just like when we added the text box, we double-clicked on text box. I'm going to double-click on button. And you see button 1 was created, and I will drag it down to the bottom of the form, and then I will double-click on button again, and there's button 2 is now created, and I will drag it also to the bottom of the form, right next to button 1. And a dialog box, or the Save File dialog and Open File dialog boxes are added the same way to the project. And the difference is that the dialog boxes will not be added directly to the form, but they will instead be added to the tray under the form. And I will double click on Open File Dialog, and you see under the form it was added to the tray, and it is right there under the right hand side under the form in the little tray. And that was Open File Dialog 1. Now I'm going to do it with Save File Dialog. Double click. I'm going to have to resize here. Okay, and there's Save File Dialog. And as you can see, by default, my Open File Dialog that I had already added, my DLG Open and DLG Save, were already there. I'll do a little resize again. And that's basically it on how to add components to the form for this particular application. That's all I wanted to demonstrate on how to add components to your form for this particular application. The basic scenario is the same for various controls. You can double click on a control, or you can click on it one time, and let me scroll up to Windows Components. And label, like for example, if I select label, instead of double clicking, I will just select label, and then I can drag it onto the form. Now you see in the middle bottom of the form, label 1, the label has now been added to the form. And remember, these components have only been added to the form, so visually they will appear there. But there is no functionality added to these components as of yet. No code has been written to respond to any events that may occur with these items. Okay, now we'll step through the code and look at the code. Start the application, open file, and I'll double click on sample data. And there's a breakpoint that I need to activate. There it is. I'll enable that breakpoint. By the way, if you want to set a breakpoint, you can click on the left margin or press F9 while your cursor is on a given line. Press F9 and you will set a breakpoint on that line. And let's click on Start. Open a file. I'm going to open sample data. And this is in fact the sample data file. And I failed to comment on this particular line the first time we went through it. Okay, this is my command button open. CMD open, this is the click event. When a click event occurs, in other words, the user clicks on the button, this is the code that is going to run. txt data.clear. In case there's any old data from a previous file that was already open, I clear the text box. So it's empty. I clear everything that's in the text box out. And then I show the open dialog box. dlg open.show dialog. That's going to cause the dialog box to show open, to be shown. I'll click on continue. And okay, sample data. And this is in fact sample data file. Sample data 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go ahead and open it again. Open another file again. And I've moved this around so that I can step through it. And you can see what's happening here on the dialog box, or what's happening on the form. Okay, now we're getting to txt data.clear. It's highlighted in yellow, so that line has not ran yet. We haven't cleared the text box. You see the text box still has, in the application that is running, still has information in it. Okay, now that subprocedure is run. The text box is now empty. The information from the previous file that was in there is now gone. And now it's showing the open dialog box. And let's go ahead and open a different file instead. Click on continue. And that is in fact the information that is the only information that is in that file. I know that for a fact. So that's okay. That's a good thing. And I will move my Visual Studio IDE around now. And I'll stop the application. Click on Save All. That's a good habit to get into. And I'll go back to the design mode on the form. And without stepping through the code, let's quickly talk through the code. When I double-clicked on the form, a subprocedure called form load was created. However, there's no code to run. Once I double-click on the control on the form, I can write some code if I want to, but there's no code. I didn't write any code. It just created a sub procedure that made it available for us to write code into, to type code into it. And that's true for just about all of the controls that are available on a Windows Forms application. I'll go back to the Form 1 design again. Open file. Okay, this is the sub procedure, the click event that runs under my open button, my CMD open. Remember, I clear out the text that's in the text box of any existing data that's there. At first I clear it out, and then I have this little sub that I created called update form text. And I'm passing in an empty string so that the text at the top of the form, I make sure that it's empty. And let's right click on that and look at the definition. I'll go to the definition, update form text, input as string, and me.text. Me is the default word for a form to refer to itself. And what it's saying is set my text to be equal to whatever is input, whatever this text is being input into this sub procedure. So and remember, what I passed in was an empty string. So I'm emptying the text at the top of the form. And remember, this started by clicking on the open button. I'm calling the open dialog box so I can see a particular file that I want to open. And dlg open.show dialog. This is where the dialog box gets shown to us visually. This is called and causes the dlg open to be shown to us so that we can open a file. And remember the filter property that we set during design time? This is just a comment that I added as a quick reminder, a quick demonstration that it could be set in code at some point. dlg open.filter equals whatever, and that's the string to set the filter property as an example. And I will add it, I will make that a comment, so it is not readable code. It's not code that the compiler will read now, it is now a comment. Okay, now we're going to get away from the code that is directly under the open command button. As I've already discussed, I clear the text data first before we open another file. I clear the data in the text box in case there's old data in there. And I update the form in the title bar to be an empty string. And then I call this show dialog box method to show the open dialog box. And by default, just like with any other control that we've examined so far, by default, although the dialog box control is not added directly to the form, it is added to the tray right under the form. When you double click on it, the default method creates a code sub procedure available for a developer to write code into. And let me see, I'm trying to find it. Okay, there it is. dlg open file OK. This is the procedure that is created by default when I double click on that control. It is by default empty. And the code that you see there is the code that I wrote into this procedure. And I define something called reader as new io.streamReader, passing in the file name of the open dialog box. So what we're going to do is in the file name of the dialog open box is the full path of the file and the file name, including the extension. And we're going to set the text of the text box to be equal to the reader as we read it to the end of the file. So whatever we read, the full contents of that text of that file are going to be set into the text box. And then we close the reader. And closing the reader is fairly important, because that's one of the things that enables us to, as you saw in my demonstration, I would open one file and then maybe change my mind and open a different file. And I did that several times in a row. And then next I'm going to demonstrate the save functionality. We've already examined the opening file functionality. We looked at how it works, and we've looked at the code to some extent, and we're going to do the same thing with saving a file next. Okay, now we're going to examine the save file functionality. But in order to look at the save file functionality, I must first open a file. So I'm going to open a file. And it's just some junk that I typed in randomly, obviously. And here's the advantage of the scroll bars. If, for example, a user has lots of information that they want to look at, or that they need to modify possibly, then they can scroll up and down. And let's see if I can go, well, I can't go left and right, because by default the text box automatically wraps the text. So if I try to type a full string in without even hitting enter, it's going to wrap the text all the way around. The line is automatically wrapped. I am not hitting enter at all. I'm just typing randomly and without hitting enter, and that is it. There's no reason to scroll left and right in this particular case. Okay, but anyway, let's get back to saving the file. Now, if I want to, well, first of all, let's look at the junk data that I've typed in here. I'm going to save the file. I'm going to save it as nada. And you can see the additional junk that I typed there is still there. Now I'm going to go ahead and open another file. There's sample data. Once again, open. And I'm going to go ahead and open nada again. And let's see if all the additional junk gobbledygook that I typed in is still there, and it is still there. And that concludes this demonstration without stepping through the code. Now we'll go ahead, now we'll go ahead and step through the save code. I'll click on Start to start the project. Okay, now the application is running as the user would see it. And I guess I will go, I don't have to, but I will go ahead and open a file first. And I will open sample data. You see sample data 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with the lines that follow it. And I will add an additional line. So I've added another line, and I'll click on Save File. I'm going to go ahead and rearrange my Visual Studio IDE on my desktop, so that as the code runs, we can see any changes that may happen on the form. Okay, now there's the open dialog, or the Save Dialog Box. And I think I had sample data. I want to save this as sample data. And it says file has been saved. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open file now just to show that it has in fact been saved. And I'll open up nothing. Okay, and this is the nothing file. And I will add another line. Okay, so I added another line to the nothing file, and I'll save it. Okay, and now we want to show the Save Dialog Box that is about to be called. Remember, this is the click event for the button. And the click event, which I just clicked, the click event for the button, I just clicked on the button, we'll call this shows the Save Dialog Box. And I will click on Continue. And here is the Save Dialog Box. It says Save File. And it was a nothing file, so I will save it as nothing, so I don't overwrite it or overwrite the wrong file. Okay, the file has been saved, and there's the other line that I added. Remember, another line that I added had a period after it. The first one had an exclamation mark after it. And that concludes the Open and Save File Dialog Box demo. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the videos.